Ambassador and Padmini, two names which instantly resonate with the post-independence era of India. This was a time when freedom was new and the entire country was now looking at a drained economy and severe poverty. But ambition was high. Why such a fuss over two names? Certainly Gen Z like me just see them as clueless, having no idea why these two existed. India wanted to make its own cars but did not have the know-how. The Ambassador and Padmini is a tale of foreign collaboration, protected and closed economy, and a huge lesson not only for business, but for life. This is a case dive. Chapter 1. The Start. It's August 1947, and India has attained freedom. But it also has a big job rebuilding itself from scratch with nothing. India had learned that capitalism, for all its merits, still drained India not only of its wealth, but also its energy. Despite the atrocities of the British rule, basic infrastructure such as roads, railways, buildings, etc. were all laid and built under it. India was no stranger to cars, since the British who worked for the Crown in the country did import popular cars like the Model T, while Rolls-Royce managed to make a huge dent by selling their cars to the many Maharajas who ruled in the princely states. The common mass still had to rely on their bicycle or their feet. Still, ambition was rising, and it was decided that India would be having more roads. By 1947, two major business houses emerged within India's non-existent car market. Hindustan Motors was formed in 1942 by Mr. B. M. Birla, who saw the potential of making cars. Now, of course, he and his men did not have a design of their own, and I guess actually had no idea how to make cars since it was their first entry. They decided to collaborate with Morris Motors. This was a British brand, a very well-established British brand which was a favorite back home, and because of a large-scale presence of affluent English population, Morris Motors actually sold their cars officially in India. HM starts with assembling Morris 10s and selling them as Hindustan 10s. Simple, compact, cheap. But of course, because India had been completely drained of its economy and countless years of being constantly suppressed every day, the Morris 10 was a status symbol. The entire idea of having a car, actually, was a status symbol. But HM had done well, and 1950s were their actually golden age. This was the decade when HM would see their rise, peak, and downfall in terms of their products. HM was on a roll. Despite independence from the British rule, British collaborations flourished beautifully. Because India had no idea what economic model to follow, business was left unrestricted at the start. India had been the country for trade. Trading and business in India was as natural as breathing air. HM just started to acquire tooling after tooling for every Morris that the British Motor Corporation, which now owned Morris, was discarding. Morris 14 became Hindustan 14. Morris Minor became Baby Hindustan. Morris Oxford Series 2 became Hindustan Landmaster. By 1956, HM had smoothly established itself as a major India automobile company and had become professionals at making cars. Well, professional by Indian standards at the time, and please note, cars were being introduced every 3 years or so with significant revisions or additions. In 1957, the third series of the Morris Oxford was launched as the Hindustan Ambassador, which was quite state-of-the-art on the Indian roads back then. Tail fins, monocoque body, almost perfect orthodox three-box sedan design, tons of space in the interior thanks to bench seats and column-mounted manual gearbox. It was instantly seen as something regal, something official, especially in black, navy blue, dark green, or white. But the Indian economy was now starting to close itself. Because India was poor, opening the markets meant foreign companies coming to get a piece of the Indian market. India had learnt its lesson, which was still very much new, by allowing a foreign company to set up shop on its land, and it costed the country 200 years. So a mixed economic model was adopted which leaned quite heavily on socialism. This meant that HM could not continue launching new cars, as producing new cars meant new molds and other raw materials from outside, and it also meant that if HM wanted to actually produce a new car of their own, it meant applying for a new license, which wasn't easy to get. Because this was the start of the license raj, which meant businesses were heavily regulated and were not allowed to flourish freely. Now, this idea seems fair as it would not create an income disparity, but on the ground it certainly did. And gave rise to corruption because how would you acquire a license for anything? By bribing, of course. But this was a massive investment and resources like steel were scarce, or at least that's what businesses and the common mass was told. And the private sector was still seen with a suspicion because they were profit-driven. The main idea behind protectionism was that it would throw out foreign companies and help grow Indian companies. And Indian companies needed to do a lot of R&D and testing, coming out with concepts or sketches, but HM did not bother to do that. Lazy because no incentive to do something new could be, but HM wasn't alone. Premier Automobile Limited also emerged from another big Indian business house, this time with Seth Walchan behind the wheel. The Walchan Group was and is credited to have been built India's first shipyard. Naturally, like Birla, he had also realized the potential to build cars for the new India. Unlike HM, though, PAL collaborated with the United States. Formed in 1944, it went into collaboration with the Chrysler Group to assemble and produce Dodge and Plymouth cars such as the Savoy and the Kingsway. It also made trucks and sold them under the Fargo name. But in 1952, they decided to bring Italy in as American cars proved to be too big and too thirsty for the Indian middle class. Fiat came up with almost the perfect answer and a viable alternative to the 1.5-liter Ambassador. The 1100 range was more compact, lighter, and fuel-efficient. Of course, being Italian, it also proved to be fun behind the wheel. Like HM, PAL also came up with quick revisions, starting with the 1100 Millicento, 1100 Elegance, 1100 Select, 1100 Super Select. All throughout the early 1960s, it established itself as the second player which undercutted the leader. But like HM, PAL was not going to escape the restrictions, so when they finally acquired the tooling for the 1100 Delight in 1964, it was barred to come up with any new models freely. So by 1966, the country had two quite big players, manufacturing old cars as new and quite literally calling it a day. No new models, no new major changes, just keeping them as they were. Hard to imagine, isn't it? Only two cars, well, three if you count Stampro, but that's for another video, on sale, and both pretty much out of reach for the average Indian. Both these old cars were seen as jewels, symbols of tremendous power in India. No hunger, no poverty. But how long could you keep this up? Surprisingly, for a very long time. And that's what part 2 would be. If you made it to the end, I'd like to thank you for sticking. You are one of the lucky ones with a robust attention span and keen interest in cars and history. Only like and subscribe if you genuinely like the video. Thank you.